She handed her daughter to a gorilla, not as a joke, not as a metaphor, a bride. The humid jungle air clung to her skin, heavy and wet. Mosquitoes buzzed like tiny alarms in the night. Victoria Ashford's hand trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of a choice no mother should ever make. 300 pounds of muscle and silver hair waited. His eyes were impossibly intelligent, focused, patient. Cato, the guardian of the deep forest. Victoria's daughter, Elena, stood in a simple white dress, barefoot, hands trembling. But her eyes burned with determination. "You don't have to do this," Victoria whispered. "I have to," Elena said. And then she stepped forward. You might be asking yourself, why? Why would a mother give her daughter to a gorilla? Because wealth has a price. And some prices cannot be paid with money. The Ashford fortune spanned more than a century. Oil, diamonds, pharmaceuticals, empires built on extraction. And each generation believed they could control it, bend it, master it, until they learned they could not. Victoria inherited more than wealth. She inherited a covenant, a contract older than the family itself, written by her great-great-grandfather, Cornelius Ashford, deep in the African Congo. Every fourth generation, a daughter must marry the forest's choice. Do not misunderstand. This was not metaphorical, not symbolic, real, literal. Fail to comply, and the family's fortune and life itself would collapse. 6 years before the jungle wedding, Victoria sat in her Manhattan penthouse, floor-to-ceiling windows looking down on the city, cold and distant. Her father was dead, her inheritance vast, her future secure, or so she thought. Then Gerald, the family lawyer, slid a parchment across the table. "This isn't a joke," he said. Victoria read the words. Her father had made a deal, a covenant with something the world had forgotten, but the forest remembered. Before she could react, her phone rang. Her stocks had collapsed. Billions vanished in minutes. Coincidence? She didn't believe in that anymore. Her daughter Elena, vibrant and strong, began wasting away. Doctors were baffled. Specialists across continents had no answers. Tests came back perfect. But Elena's body betrayed her. Muscles failed. Weight dropped. Energy disappeared. It was as if something invisible had taken her from the inside. Then a message appeared on Victoria's phone. The covenant is not a suggestion. No name. No explanation. Just a reminder that debt does not forgive. Victoria called Gerald. He knew nothing. No one did. Her world, so meticulously controlled, had begun to unravel. 3 days later, Victoria brought Elena to the clearing in the Congo. No roads. No guidebooks. Only Joseph, the old intermediary who had guided Cornelius Ashford decades earlier. "The guardian has waited 100 years, Joseph said. "You are late." And then, from the treeline, Cato emerged. He didn't roar. He didn't rush. He simply sat, massive and calm, and looked at them. Victoria's breath caught. This was not a monster, not a beast, not even a gorilla in the usual sense. It was something else, something patient, something that understood contracts, debts, and consequences far deeper than any human mind could comprehend. And Elena, she stepped forward anyway. 3 months passed. Elena healed in the forest. Slowly, unnervingly, deliberately. Cato never touched her unless she allowed it. The forest did not demand obedience. It demanded understanding. Elena learned lessons no classroom could teach. That extraction has consequences. That imbalance always finds a way to correct itself. That the weight of wealth is measured not in dollars, but in debts, paid and unpaid. Victoria, meanwhile, watched from Goma. Pacing, drinking, obsessing. Every day she asked Joseph, "Is she safe?" He always answered the same. "Yes, but you cannot follow her." Because the covenant did not tolerate interference. And the world had a way of enforcing rules older than law. By the 7th day in the forest, Elena stood taller. Her sickness was gone. Her eyes had changed. She was no longer a daughter in need. She was a woman who had glimpsed the ledger of existence and survived it. And when Victoria approached her, tears streaking her face, Elena whispered, "I understand now. I will do what must be done. If you think this is the climax, you're wrong." What happens when a human steps fully into a covenant older than kingdoms? What happens when the forest collects its due? What happens to the mother, watching her child walk into the unknown, trusting a gorilla more than herself? That is the story you are about to hear. A story of wealth, of debt, of sacrifice, and of a forest that remembers everything. The first night in the forest, Elena didn't sleep. She listened. Every sound mattered. Every rustle of leaves, every distant bird call, every footstep in the undergrowth. Cato watched her, not threatening, not curious, just observing. "You are not a prisoner," he seemed to say. "You are a witness." Elena realized quickly she could not fight this. She could not run. She could not manipulate. She could only learn. The lessons began with silence. Days passed. Elena spoke less and observed more. Cato showed her how to move without leaving traces, how the forest tracked every step of every creature, how balance was measured in lives, not in dollars. The first time he touched her hand, it wasn't rough. It wasn't cold. It was deliberate and terrifying. She felt the weight of centuries of debt in that single gesture. Meanwhile, Victoria waited in Goma, and the months stretched endlessly. She could not sleep. She could not eat. She drank. She paced. She demanded answers from Joseph. Is she alive? Yes. Safe? Yes. How do you know? Silence. Victoria began to hate that silence more than she feared death. Elena began regaining strength. Slowly, carefully. Her body remembered movement. Her mind remembered control. Her spirit began to understand limits. The forest had rules. Cato enforced them. But the forest did not punish recklessly. Every lesson had purpose. Every restriction had reason. By the third month, Elena could climb trees. She could track animals. She could anticipate their movements. She could read the forest like a living map. And when she returned to the clearing each evening, Cato's gaze held a question. Do you understand? And she did. Back in Goma, Victoria's empire began to fracture. Buildings burned. Accounts froze. Trusted allies vanished. It wasn't random. It wasn't coincidence. It was the covenant enforcing itself, reminding her that nothing can escape consequence. For the first time in decades, Victoria understood fear. Not of losing money. Not of losing power. Fear of inevitability. And it was cold. Elena began to see patterns. The forest remembered every extraction, every transaction, every life displaced for profit. She felt it. Not as guilt. Not as fear. But as responsibility. Every Ashford dollar, every empire built on human or environmental cost, was a ledger in the forest's memory. She could feel the imbalance, and she could correct it. Victoria tried everything. Private military teams, satellites, bribery, legal threats. Nothing worked. The forest, Cato, the covenant, they were not negotiable. Her desperation only highlighted her own powerlessness. By the end of the first year, Elena's transformation was unmistakable. No longer a child. No longer fragile. No longer defined by wealth or privilege. She had become something else. Something the world could not easily categorize. A bridge between human reckoning and ancient balance. And then, one morning, Cato led her to the deepest part of the forest. He did not speak. He did not touch her. He simply stopped, sat, and waited. Elena understood. The covenant's final lessons were about now. About choice. About responsibility. About knowing the weight of a life and acting, even when no one is watching. Victoria, watching from a distance, had no idea what her daughter had become. She only knew this. If Elena failed, all would be lost. If Elena succeeded, all would be unrecognizable. And the truth of it was, Victoria could not control either outcome. By the second year, Elena began small acts of restitution. She collected knowledge from the forest. She identified places and people harmed by Ashford wealth. She corrected quietly. No announcements. No fanfare. Every act was a stitch in repairing centuries of extraction. Cato watched. He nodded once. And Elena felt it. Approval. Completion. Responsibility accepted. At this point, you might think the story is about a girl and a gorilla. It's not. It's about wealth, inheritance, debt, and the invisible cost we pay when we take more than we return. Elena's journey has only just begun. Victoria's torment is far from over. And the forest remembers everything. The seventh year arrived faster than anyone expected. Elena stood at the edge of the clearing. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, casting shadows that looked alive. Birds paused. Leaves barely moved. The forest was holding its breath. Cato emerged from the trees. Massive, calm. silver back gleaming in the sun. Victoria, hiding in the perimeter, could barely watch. Her hands were shaking. She felt sick, dizzy, powerless. Every instinct screamed at her to intervene. But Joseph's words rang in her ears. If you follow, you break the covenant. Everything ends, including Elena. Her heart ached. She hated the forest. She hated the covenant. She hated herself for ever believing she could control fate. Elena walked forward, alone, barefoot. Her white dress caught the sunlight, but it was simple, no ornamentation. Joseph had explained, the guardian respects dignity, not decoration. She stopped in front of Cato. The gorilla didn't move. He simply regarded her, steady, knowing, patient. The official, brought from a nearby village and paid handsomely to obey, read the marriage declaration. His voice wavered. The words were unlike anything the Ashfords had ever heard. To honor the covenant. To live with the guardian for 7 years. To restore balance. Elena didn't flinch. She looked Cato in the eyes. I do. And then the impossible happened. Cato extended a hand. Not threatening. Not dominating. Deliberate. Gentle. Elena took it. And as they touched, a current of understanding passed between them. Human and guardian, mortal and forest, child and debt repaid. Victoria collapsed behind a tree. Tears streamed down her face. Her daughter alive, and yet gone. No words could explain it. The last she heard as Elena followed Cato into the jungle was a calm whisper. I'll be okay, Mom. And then they vanished. For months, Victoria waited. Satellite imagery revealed nothing. Private investigators found nothing. Even Joseph could only give vague reports. She is learning. She is surviving. She is growing. You must wait. Victoria drank. She obsessed. She tried to bargain. She screamed at the forest, at the covenant, at fate itself. And slowly, she began to understand. The covenant was not cruelty. It was not punishment. It was a teacher. Elena thrived in ways the world could not measure. She learned to move like Cato, to hunt, to read the patterns of life and death in the forest. She healed completely. Her body, her mind, her spirit stronger than before. The forest demanded balance, and she delivered it. Small acts at first, returning stolen land, correcting ecological harm, quietly helping the humans displaced by Ashford wealth. Then larger acts, dismantling destructive ventures from afar, redirecting corporate influence. She became a force no one could see, but everyone felt. Victoria watched it all, powerless. Her empire faltered. Buildings burned. Art collections vanished. Accounts froze. It was not random. It was inevitable. Every extraction demanded repayment. Every debt demanded attention. And the forest collected. 3 years passed. Elena returned to the clearing only occasionally. Each visit, Cato waited. Each visit, she learned more. Each visit, Victoria's obsession grew. She realized something terrifying. The covenant had not broken Elena. It had freed her. And in freeing her daughter, the covenant had slowly begun to free Victoria as well. By the 7th year, Elena was no longer the girl who had stepped barefoot into the jungle. She was a woman of extraordinary presence. Every movement measured. Every glance deliberate. Every word weighted. She could have claimed anything. Wealth, power, recognition. But she chose silence, balance, restitution. Her actions reshaped the world quietly. No media, no press, no fanfare, only impact. Victoria understood at last. The true wealth of the Ashfords was never money. It was responsibility. And Elena had learned it. And the forest had remembered it. Hooking moment for retention. You may think the story ends here. But what happens after a human fulfills an ancient covenant? What does freedom mean when your debt has been paid? And what is the cost of watching someone you love become something the world cannot contain? The answers are in the final year of the covenant. The 7th year was almost over. Elena stood at the edge of the clearing one last time. Sunlight slanted through the trees, casting long shadows. The jungle seemed to hold its breath, waiting. Cato emerged from the shadows. Not a monster, not a beast, not even a simple gorilla. Something older, something patient, something that knew the cost of debts and the value of balance. Elena stepped forward. Her bare feet pressed into the soft earth. She reached out. Cato mirrored her motion. Their hands met. A bond solidified. It was not love in the human sense. Not obsession. Not friendship. Something deeper. Something almost mathematical. A debt repaid. A balance restored. Victoria watched from the perimeter. She had spent 7 years counting every heartbeat of her daughter, every moment of inaction, every failure of control. And now she could do nothing. She could only watch. And in that watching, she understood something terrifying and liberating at once. The covenant was not cruelty. It was inevitability. And inevitability was not optional. Elena had changed. She returned to the world differently. Quietly. Unassumingly. She did not seek headlines, money, or power. She did not flaunt her survival. She did not announce her mastery of the covenant. She acted in silence, correcting wrongs quietly, restoring ecosystems, healing human and environmental debts. Every action precise, every choice deliberate. She became an invisible force. Victoria's empire continued to collapse, piece by piece. Buildings burned. Investments failed. Trusted allies vanished. Assets froze. The world's balance demanded repayment. And the Ashfords were no exception. Victoria felt rage. She felt fear. She felt helplessness, but also a strange relief. Her daughter was alive. And in surviving, Elena had restored something she herself had long lost: perspective. Elena visited the clearing one last time. She stood alone. Cato appeared. Their eyes met. No words were exchanged. None were needed. The covenant had been honored. The debt had been paid. Balance had been restored. The forest, patient and relentless, allowed her to leave. She turned and walked away, and the trees whispered behind her. Victoria never followed. She understood now that some things must be lived, not controlled. Observed, not possessed. She returned to her villa, to a life smaller than she had imagined, yet fuller than she had ever known. No wealth could replace what she had learned. No empire could undo what she had witnessed. She began to live differently, slowly, thoughtfully, carefully. Elena never returned to wealth. She never returned to public attention. She did not want to be the Ashford heiress. She did not want to be remembered. She wanted balance. The forest had given it to her, and she would carry it into the world quietly, deliberately, unobserved. And what of Cato? He returned to the jungle, his duty fulfilled, his patience eternal. The guardian of the deep forest had taken a daughter, guided her through trial, and restored the scales. And then he faded into legend. Victoria reflected on everything years later. The empire, once her pride, was gone. Her wealth, once untouchable, was diminished. And yet she was free. Free from illusion. Free from control. Free from the endless pursuit of more. The covenant had not destroyed her family. It had reshaped it. Not in wealth. Not in power. Not in fame. In responsibility. In understanding. In balance. And for the first time, Victoria realized the true legacy of the Ashfords was not dollars. It was awareness. And that legacy, Elena had mastered. The forest remembered. The debt had been paid. Balance was restored. And the world, silent and indifferent, moved on. But those who knew, who understood, they remembered too.